Hello and welcome to Raw Sport Fantasy League. It's 6 minutes past 6 on your student radio station, Raw 1251 AM. It's a special Fantasy League this week. It's cut in half. In the second half, we'll have our general football chat and more. Joe Spagnoli will be revealing his favourite football team. But for now, we have live Hustings from Raw for the position of sports officer. I'm joined in the studio by Hugo Barethon, Barraj Dingra, John Wilson and Liam Stafford. I might have got yours wrong. I don't know. It's perfect. Lovely. Christy Hewitt will not be attending today due to training commitments. What we'll do is we'll begin with each candidate giving a 1-minute opening statement, and we'll then move into specific questions for each candidate. At the end, each candidate will ask one of the others a question about their campaigns, and then we'll have a 30-second closing statement after that. You can also get your questions asked live on air. You can text 07507 87777, tweet us at Raw1251am, or use the contact tab on the radio player you might very well be listening to, or on our website. Please don't ask any personal questions to each candidate. Try and shape them so it's asked to everybody. I won't ask any specific personal questions that you send in. So we'll start with the 1-minute opening statement, and we'll start with John. John, are you all ready?
Sure.
Lovely. Well, feel free to go ahead.
Okay, so probably by this point, a lot of you will have read our manifestos. We'll know what you stand for, so I'll keep this brief. I want to really highlight the spectrum of sport that we have here. I think it's really key in being an active campus that people can do the sport they want. And a huge part of that is having a variety of sports from people to choose from. Part of how I want to do this as well is a varsity reform. I want to make it a real spectator event for all sports, not just varsity sports, but I want to be organising friendlies as well. Sports exec, no one knows who they are, what they do. I've been asking all week who knows anyone on the sports exec, and I've had blank stares back. No one's running for it. It's not the most democratically representative body. They do brilliant work, and they're not praised enough, and they're not as democratically representative as they should be either. And finally, sport and mental health. Obviously, term 3 is a really hard time for a lot of us, and that's when we're not getting sport, which in my mind just doesn't make sense. So I want to make sure that everyone has the sport they want when they need it.
Cool. Thank you very much, Barraj. Your minute can start now.
Hi, I'm Bal, and I'm running to be sports officer simply because of how much I love sport and what it can offer people, whether you're an athlete, a spectator, or simply someone who knows someone who does sport. Like John said, you've probably read our manifestos by now, so I feel like it's just important to highlight what I feel is the most important part of my manifesto. To that end, I think it's most importantly getting everyone involved in sport, an idea of sport for all. So to that end, I want to introduce more flexible and cheaper memberships for people trying to join sports at the beginner level. For the developing level, I want to make sure that people are using the new performance sports system to really strive their clubs to the next level, really. And for the elite level, I want to introduce leniency in admissions from the university side, and also better scholarships for the elite athletes. Furthermore, I want to make varsity a bigger event than it was this year, introducing varsity clothing, varsity stash, and making friendly fixtures so more clubs can get involved so we can build the hype more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hugo, you're up next.
Hey guys, I'm Hugo. I'm just going to focus on a couple of points of my manifesto because, as other people have said, you've probably read it already or heard it already. I think one of the most important things that I want to focus on is making sure that postgraduate students are involved from very early on by providing more accommodation for pre-season, very clear information in the early weeks, and continuous support for them. I also want to emphasise how important week 0 is going to be in the following years. We really need to make sure that all sports are present during that week to ensure that all freshers, no matter how if they're master students or not, make sure they know all the information that's available for them and all the different sports that they can participate in at Warwick. And finally, I also want to emphasise Faces of Sport program that I want to create. I want to focus each week on a different sport, having different interviews by different members and exec members throughout that week, so that we can build a hype all year on and make Team Warwick a huge thing during the whole year and not just for varsity.
Cool. Thank you very much. And finally, Liam Stafford.
Hi everyone, Staff here. Sport has basically been an absolutely huge part of my life. I played for Wales when I was younger in squash, and since coming to uni, I've been on the SU Sports Exec, and I'm the current president and first team captain at the squash club. Sport has shaped my life in so many different ways, and as a result of that, I'm just so passionate about getting as many students into sport as possible. One thing I want to kind of hammer home, though, is that whilst ideas are very important, I know for a fact that I can actually get things done. The sports partnership is so important, and having a good relationship with the sports partnership is something that I've had for the last 2 years at university. So it's all about tangible change for students, and I can bring that. So yeah, vote Staff for Sports. Cheers.
Cool. Thank you very much. And we'll start with specific questions, and we'll start with you, Staff. You've mentioned in your manifesto a Refreshers Sports Day in Term
Yes.
2. What exactly is your vision for this?
So essentially, I feel like a lot of freshers come to uni and they're kind of put off in the first couple of weeks. It can be quite daunting when it comes to joining sports clubs. And I think a lot of first years get towards the end of term 1 and they haven't joined a sports club and they wish they had, but they feel like it's too late. So I think in terms of the Refreshers Sports Day, just getting as many clubs involved as possible, putting on free taster sessions for first years so that they can know that it's not too late to join a sports club, and essentially increase membership across all sports clubs.
Cool. Thank you very much. Bao, we'll move to you now. In your manifesto, you mentioned joint sponsorship packages for smaller clubs. What's the idea behind this, and how will this improve club sponsorship effectively?
It's a great point. Thanks for asking me about that. For me, coming from dodgeball, which is a sport which is not hugely popular in the UK or in the world, it's very difficult to get sponsors. Obviously, they want to get their name out there, which is why they sponsor clubs. And, being part of a smaller club, it's difficult because you don't have the numbers that they necessarily want. So with this joint sponsorship package, what will happen is a firm would represent 3 or 4 smaller clubs on campus. Therefore, they'd get the numbers they'd want, and the clubs will be able to get the sponsorship they need to push their club to the next level. And I think it's a really good way to get the clubs the funding they need for transport or for kit or whatever. Therefore, they can help the sport grow, and the sponsors will be happy with the numbers of people looking at their firm's logo or whatever.
Okay. Hugo, you also mentioned in your manifesto you want to increase opportunities for both newly established and potential sport clubs on campus. How exactly will you go about this?
So talking to people during my whole sort of campaign, I've had a number of people who are part of small clubs who told me that they've struggled to sort of form their club, and there's very strict restrictions on how many people you need to create a club, and I'd like those restrictions to be a bit more flexible. I think that if somebody is willing to sort of create a new club or sort of advance a new club within university, I think the restrictions should be very small, and I think that we should encourage people to do so, because if you see that a club has been created and if there's a very few number of members, you'll really want to join that, whereas if that club hasn't been created at all, you have no incentive to take part in it, and it's a very good publicity no matter how many people are within a club to be able to just create a club and say that you're one of the 65 plus sports at Warwick.
Okay. John, we'll move to you now. You mentioned in your manifesto increased training for welfare officers in clubs. How do you think this will benefit the clubs and the students within them?
So I want to start by saying that I think it's a really, really good that we now have welfare officers in every club. And I think clubs, certainly for me, my club is my family. They're a real support system for me. And I think the welfare officer is key in this role. But at the moment, I feel like in some cases it's just a title. People don't really know what they should be doing or how they should be doing it. So I want to make the training available for welfare officers so that they can have more of an impact in their clubs and make sure that their club is a more supportive environment, and that people, I'm aware I'm saying support a lot, but get the support that they need when they need it.
Okay. Well, we'll move to you again. Again, you mentioned in your manifesto that you wanted to make sure clubs were connecting more. Is it something more than just a Facebook club for bringing people together? What exactly would you have then to bring people together? That's yes, well.
So when I was speaking to people before running, one of the things I found out was that clubs, as much as they wanted to communicate with each other, found it hard. I heard from someone that whilst the Facebook group for presidents is okay, it doesn't necessarily tell you which club they run. So to that end, it's a very simple solution, just creating like a Google Doc where, one club member from each club has their number there, tells them what club they're part of, even their training times perhaps, when they're free to meet, things like that. Makes so much easier for clubs to communicate if they need to change timings or something like that, just to make it easier for all of Warwick Sport to run that much more efficiently, that much more easier. And, that all ties in with making it easier to run a sports club, which is one of my manifesto key points.
Okay. Staff, you want to bring back Game of the Week. We saw this on campus a couple of years ago. Why do you think it's an effective way of raising awareness for Team Warwick and sport at Warwick?
That's a good question. I think it creates a lot more of a buzz when you have, I think it makes it a lot more personal. I think a lot of people live kind of within the bubble of their own clubs quite a lot, and a lot of people now use Snapchat, so having access to kind of and viewing other clubs and seeing what they're doing on a Wednesday, I think it'll just really add to that Team Warwick vibe that's already you can feel it getting stronger around campus, and I think that will just add to it. And also sending out a weekly email as well will just raise awareness and get more people attending live matches, which would be great.
Hugo, you say that in your manifesto that you want to make Team Warwick a year-long thing. What exactly does this mean to you?
So one of my ideas is to sort of have interviews and more information available for all clubs every week. So if you focus on a specific club every week, you can it's already been created a bit this year where you've got interviews and sort of specific articles on certain clubs. And I want to sort of pursue that idea because if, for instance, me, I want to see what this club has done this week, and you can check 4 weeks back what they have done because they were the club of the week, and that rejoins this idea of game of the week. I also think that's a very good idea because just by saying that this club is really is going to have a very important part of work this week, it means that you build the hype for everybody, and everybody wants to look at that club and spectate the events of that club. And I think if you do that week in, week out, it will make teamwork a much bigger thing throughout the year and not just a varsity.
John, you mentioned about non-varsity sports having friendlies and to try and raise awareness. How exactly would this work?
Yeah, so I've spoken to a number of clubs that don't have varsity either for one reason or another. So, for example, motorsport, it usually happens, it just fell through this year. Rifle, there isn't really a rifle team at Coventry. So what I'd want to be doing is I'd want to be in dialogue with those clubs, talking about the universities in the vicinity, who's on not just who's close, but on a similar level as well. So it can become, a really interesting event because as much as we love beating Coventry, the close matches are the more interesting ones. And I don't want them to be losing out on the spectacle of varsity just because, Coventry doesn't have a team or there's been some paperwork that hasn't quite gone through in time or these reasons that really shouldn't be holding a club back. So yeah, it's mostly going to be in dialogue with the clubs because they know their sport a lot better than I do because it's their sport. And looking at other universities to make sure that they can have a competition at the same time that people can still be invested in, even if it's not part of the official varsity.
Okay, moving on to varsity, obviously is the biggest job a sports officer will have is organising varsity. We had a great varsity this year. Yet again, we thrashed Coventry. It's not, again, but it's never really that competitive. 28 years gone where we've beaten Coventry. Coventry were never really in it this year, other than the showcase sports in basketball that they won. I want to go round the panel and ask, in a short time, how exactly are you going to improve varsity for spectators next year? We'll start with you, Staff.
Yeah, so I said this in my question time. I really, really want to get both Raw and the Boar involved in varsity coverage. They both do absolutely incredible coverage of varsity. As you know, Ed, so much effort goes into it, yet only members of the societies actually see the coverage. So I really want to embed both Raw and Boar coverage of varsity into the official varsity SU website and just generally promote it a lot more so that far more people across campus get to watch varsity and get involved.
Hugo? How exactly will you improve varsity?
So my best idea, or the thing I'd love to do most to improve varsity, would to make it a longer period of time. So if we make varsity a 2 or 3 day event like we've done this year, that means you only have 1 or 2 showcase sports. Whereas if you make it, let's say, a whole week, you have 7 different showcase sports because you have it over 7 different days, which makes it more interesting for different people who want to watch. Who can see their sport as number one during that day. And I also think it'd be a very good idea because I wanted to go and see some fixtures and there were 3 different sports that were in the same time, and I think that's very bad because if you want to see 2 different sports and they're in the same time, it's sort of losing a spectator at that game. And if you manage to separate all those fixtures, it means more spectators per game, and it means better environment for everyone.
Well.
So the things that people have mentioned is brilliant. Getting Raw and the Boar on board would be fantastic. Spreading fixtures out so they don't clash as well would be brilliant. For me in particular, one of the things I want to do is introduce Varsity Stash. Like last year, Ted threw out a bunch of T-shirts during Pop, and I still have one of them. It's one of my favourite T-shirts, my Varsity shirt. I absolutely love it. And this year, you may have seen Cov repping their blue Varsity hoodies. I mean, I think they look sick in Warwick colours, so I don't think there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to have that too. It really, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but for me, repping kit when I'm on the court is one of my favourite things when I'm playing sport. And varsity, I think, for spectators to be able to all turn up in one unified colour would be absolutely amazing.
And finally, John?
Yeah, so I think these are all good ideas. And the addition that I'd make is obviously, the showcase of sport, the showcase events is a really good way of focusing that support. And obviously we have the transport to the basketball this year, but if you wanted to go see something in Coventry other than the basketball, well, you were making your own way there. Yeah. And so fencing was actually away for the first time this year. And I actually got lost in Coventry Sports Centre. Couldn't find the place at all because we were in this little room. And actually ended up being a really good event. It was really tight, 125, 124, would have been brilliant to watch. So I think really a a big issue is simply transport to non-showcase events. Yeah. There just isn't any guidelines on how to get to the non-showcase away events.
Okay. Specifically, you mentioned your manifesto. I mean, it links to this that you want to turn all varsity fixtures into spectator events. So, other than, I guess, creating transport systems for them, what are your other plans for that?
So in terms of other plans, those of you that remember London 2012, one of the things I loved about that Olympics was all the videos that were produced explaining what's going on in all the sports, so that people who had never seen the sports before still had an opportunity to go along and understand what was going on. I was lucky enough to go watch the fencing, and as a fencer, I understood what was going on. But a lot of people in that crowd won't have been fencers. They would have just wanted to go see the Olympics and never have come into contact before. And these videos were a great way of explaining and allowing them to engage with that sport. So I'm going to be working with the clubs to create something similar, probably more flyers than videos, simply for ease and because people are busy. But I want people to be able to engage with the sports, and I want the sports clubs to be helping me with that.
Wow, I mean, we look at the showcase events this year. Obviously, there was good turnout. You know, there was 300 plus people at the football, I believe, but there are 24,000 plus students at Warwick. Do you think Varsity Stash is a way of getting more people outside of sports clubs and not just people who are just turning up to see their mate play, get involved with varsity?
I definitely think so. It really brings together that sense of community of Warwick and really drives behind that hashtag Team Warwick brand, which needs to be improved on and needs to be made bigger and better. It's on all our sports kit at the moment, the hashtag Team Warwick. And I think for people who don't play sports, to be able to get their hands on some of that Team Warwick branding stuff will be amazing. And they'll probably be more likely to turn up to events, make crowds bigger and better, and make varsity a hugely fantastic event this year.
Hugo, I mean, I guess you said about building Team Warwick across the year, and you want to build varsity up across the year as well. You plan to centralise all Team Warwick news and results into one location to help awareness. Why will this help build the varsity vibe, and how will this help people, from outside sport clubs who aren't involved, to get involved with Team Warwick?
Well, to be honest, that idea is more focused on within the sports community, because all the different sports can see what other sports partners are doing. But if you sort of open that online hub and you just say it's part of the SU website and anybody can access it, I think even if you're somebody who's just a bit bored, sometimes you're on the SU website and you see a page, sports, how is every sport doing right now, and you can see those sort of different showcases of the week. It'd be a very good idea to make everybody who's not really into sport a bit more interested. And actually, I'd love the idea of flyers and stuff like that. If you have next to, let's say you have a week of fencing, and just next to you have a little flyer or little articles about the simple rules and how it works, how long a game is, I think it'd be a very good idea to get everybody more into sport in general and then build it up for varsity.
Okay. Staff, I mean, we talk about varsity, obviously squash. At the one point, I don't think you dropped a game.
No.
And the competition aspect of varsity is an issue in the fact that we thump Coventry every year.
Yeah.
And as I say, John was saying that the best fixtures are the ones that are close, like fencing, there's 1 point in it. How can we make varsity more competitive? I know it's difficult because Coventry aren't as good a university in that sport as us. How can we make it more competitive and more interesting for people?
To be honest, it's a tricky one because, as we've seen, the number of fixtures has gone down in varsity simply because Cov can't field enough teams. I think as a result of that, it's really difficult to increase the number of fixtures just because of that. So I suppose one of the main things to do would be to try and look at the matches that will be competitive and look to put them as showcases. But if I'm being completely honest, I think we're going to have to get used to smashing Coventry at varsity. I think there's no other way around it. To be honest, we are just too good, unfortunately.
Staying with you, obviously Week 0 is being introduced this year. How do you plan on using it to engage with freshers?
Yeah, I think Week 0 is going to be huge. I think the sports day last year it was the weekend of Week 2. And whilst it was a very, very good idea, just the schedule of it didn't work. So I really want to make that sports day slap bang in the middle of Welcome Week. And then we can make it even bigger and even better, get as many sports clubs involved. And that will hopefully attract a lot of first years to get involved in sport, which will hopefully last throughout the year.
Hugo, what about you? How are you going to use Week 0 to improve fresher interaction within sport?
I guess my sort of idea of how to use Week 0 would be, as you mentioned, sports day. Sports day is really hard because you've got so many sports to look at in one day, and it's really daunting for fresh. Whereas if Week 0 you only have, let's say, a fifth of the sports portrayed each day, for fresher, it's because there's less people there. there's more opportunity. Then there's sort of different days you're less scared, and you know which sort of a few sports you'd get interested into, so you only go for a few days, and it's less crowded. And I think if every day there's a bit less people there, and sports are easily or more capable of displaying what their sport is, it'd be a very good way to get all the freshers involved from the start.
Okay, Bao?
I think week 0 has incredible potential to go incredibly, but also the potential to be bad. So we need to get it right. And to that end, I think it's important that we run events every day, all day. That sport isn't really given a break, so that it's really in the students' face that sport is a massive thing at this university, and the students can get engaged with it at any time. I don't think moving sports fair to week 0 would be great, simply because there are freshers who wouldn't want to come to week 0, but maybe a kind of taste of sports fair and then running the main one in week 1 would be a good idea. But the main thing is just making sure that there's something on every day for all students to attend.
And finally, John.
So obviously week 0, we're all really excited about it, but it is something completely new, and it's going to be, whichever of us wins, it's going to be sort of the first event that we are running. And a lot of the planning as well is going to happen before us as well. So whoever does win is going to have to be in close communication with Ali as to what we want to do for week 0. And I think there's obviously, with there being no tradition set as well, there's a lot of competition for time in term 1 between the sports, the societies and the academia as well, all want a piece of week 0. So I think that has to be taken into account. But I certainly think it's a great opportunity for sports to really show what it's got to the students and really do a lot of recruitment of students when they're out of, lectures. Can't believe I forgot that word.
Finally, we'll have closing statements in a minute. I just want to go through firstly questions for each other, and then some quick fire questions for everyone so they can get to know you better. Firstly, questions for each other. First up, Balraj, you've got one for Hugo.
Yeah, I do. So, Hugo, as part of your manifesto, you said you'd like to increase male and female participation in non-buck sport. And coming from a non-buck sport background, dodgeball's run by British Dodgeball, I'd be really interested in hearing your views on how you'd go about doing that.
Well, because I'm part of a buck sport, I think that I need to admit that I'm not probably the best capable of answering right now that question. My first sort of order of practice would be to ask every single sport that's not part of bucks what works well for them, what doesn't, what their presidents want on an individual basis for their club. And once I know what every single one of them has told me, I can then act as a potential sports officer on what to do. I think that in this case scenario, I do not, because I'm from a bucks background, I know what it takes to make some buck sports better, but I've not got as much the same amount of knowledge in non-bucks. Although that from the speaker I've talked to, no matter if you're from bucks or non-bucks, you love sport as much, and I think that they both need to be taken into the same amount of consideration.
Okay, Hugo, you're asking one to staff.
Okay, so my question would be, what are you going to do to make sort of the performance clubs even better than they are at Warwick?
Yeah, that's really good. Good question, actually. So basically, I've already been part of squash, which is performance. I've worked with Warwick Sport for the last 2 years on performance, and essentially they're looking to change the nature of performance to make it a lot more sustainable. So at the moment, you're either a performance club or you're not, and it means you can't plan in the long term with that system. So I've already worked with them to introduce this tiered system. So now it's platinum, gold, silver, bronze. And rather than getting your funding and support removed completely, you just move down a tier, which means you can then move up a tier in the next year. And it's something that, I've already spoke to performance sport a lot about, and it's something that I definitely will work well, I think.
Yeah, Steph, you got one for John.
So, John, I was going to ask you about High School Musical, but I probably won't.
Go on.
So I was actually going to ask you about performance, but we've had one of those questions already. I suppose I would ask, how much do you value the relationship with Warwick Sport, and do you have any ideas to improve that relationship?
So, as I said at the Hustings yesterday, I think the relationship with Warwick Sport is incredibly important. It's a very symbiotic relationship between the Warwick Sport and the SU, and I'm aware that a lot of students feel that they're pouring money into Warwick Sport and not seeing a lot back. So I think that certainly from that perspective, there is work to be done on the image of Warwick Sport. I think that the new sports centre is something to be really excited about, and I think that obviously, we are going to have to work very closely with Warwick Sport, especially on the performance aspect, as you wanted to ask me about. And a lot of what I want to do as well is to sort of restructure the paying system as well, to make it a bit cheaper to join single clubs and more expensive to join multiple clubs, to get more people into sport. But I'm a huge supporter of their campaign to be the most active campus in 2020, and that is going to be one of the main focuses if I get sports officer.
Okay, finally, John, you've got one for Barrage.
So I know from listening to you guys talk and listening to Christy talk that you guys have had some great ideas that I haven't thought of, and I've been kicking myself for not thinking of them. And I'm hoping I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot here, but looking at my manifesto, is there anything that you wish you'd thought of, or do you think he's just saying the same as me, or what?
Definitely, yeah. I think what you've done great in your manifesto is really pushed the support in mental health. I myself have suffered from mental health problems in the past. I've got family, friends, and close family who are suffering from mental health at the moment. Thankfully, the stigma around mental health has been breaking down in recent years. It's becoming more and more acceptable to talk about it, which I think is fantastic. And I think pushing that forward within sports and within talking about sports and its relation to mental health is something we really need to continue doing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right, finally, we'll have a quick fire round before the 30-second send-off. I want, within 5 seconds, your answer. First thing that comes to your head. Favourite food? We'll go around with stuff. Favourite food?
Curry.
Pasta.
A lovely lasagna.
Pizza.
Favourite film?
Inception.
I don't know. I've got too many.
I'd have to say Pulp Fiction, probably.
Disney's Hercules all the way.
100%. Raw or the boar?
Raw.
Raw.
Raw, I don't want to get kicked off.
I'm going to say the boar to be different.
Disappointing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming on. Best of luck with your campaigns.
Thank you.
You've all got brilliant manifesto. I think we can all see that whoever gets it will do a brilliant job. But we're going to finish off with 30-second, just an outro to why people should vote for you, and we'll start with staff and go all the way around.
So as I said before, it's really about making tangible change for all students when it comes to sport, whether you're an elite athlete or you're someone who literally doesn't even associate yourself with sport, or you're anywhere in between. There's a place for you when it comes to sport at Warwick. So if that sounds good, vote staff, your sport, your voice, your choice.
Hey guys, so I'm not going to go through anything from my manifesto. What I'm going to tell you is that if you vote for me, I promise that I will work tooth and nails all day long if that's what it takes to make sport by this time next year even better place than it is already at Warwick.
So I've spoken to Lisa Dodd-Main, I've spoken to Matt Nicholson, I've spoken to half of Warwick Sport, I think, in order to shape my manifesto. It's things that can be done and will be done if I'm made sport officer, and I will work incredibly hard to help you do that. So remember, a ball's in your court, so vote Ball for sport.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet because, as I said, you've already heard us all talk about our manifestos to death. My main goal is literally just going to be making sure that everyone has the sport that they want in the way that they want it. So that's why I'm the John that you want.
Well, thank you much. I've been joined by Hugo, Bal, John and Liam. Best of luck with your campaigns. And voting is open now, so go to the SU website and get your vote in because it's all important.